yesterday, the BBC apologised within hours, quite extraordinary, within hours, to Nigel Farage over an impartiality breach after he was accused on air by a newsreader of using customary inflammatory language. Geeta Guru-Murthy made the remark as the channel cut away from the honorary Reform UK President's press conference about migration in Dover. In the speech, Nigel Farage was defending his use of the word invasion to describe channel crossings, whereas he was the first person to raise this issue in 2020. Interviewed, by the way, on this station about that in 2020. No one else was talking about it, saying a trickle of illegal migrants had become a flood and that a large influx of young males had had a disastrous effect on other cities like countries, Swedish city of Malmo and others. And he was talking about Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, once the pin-up boy for Ramonas, who had referred to aggressive young males that are coming into Poland. And at that point, the news channel cut back to Geeta Guru-Murthy, who then said Nigel Farage there with his customary inflammatory language at Reform UK press conference. Just extraordinary. Well, she later did have to issue an on-air apology, quite rightly. The BBC has admitted an impartiality breach, but let's find out what Roger Bolton makes of it. He's the host of Beeb Watch podcast and is a former BBC executive. Good morning to you, Roger.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I have to say, it was extraordinary and yet not a surprise, because we know that's what the BBC largely think about people like Nigel Farage. They think that about me and many of the other people who voted for Brexit. We're all beyond the pale and idiots and bigots and goodness knows what. But I mean, that's an extraordinary thing for a BBC presenter to say on air, not even in an angry tweet later, but on air on BBC TV. What did you make of it?
Well, that's an extraordinary introduction you just made, making a wholesale set of assumptions about me, or I'm not employed by the BBC, I was fired by them, by the way, or by the BBC itself.
I didn't make any assumptions about you.
No, you just talked about the BBC and your assumptions about what they think about you. Can we just concentrate on the facts? Geeta Guru-Murthy said something she shouldn't have said. The BBC made her apologise within hours, full stop. If she does it again, she'll clearly be fired. Now, what you can't do, I think, is go from that individual regrettable incident and then generalise about the whole of the BBC, as you've just done, Julia.
Except I've done a lot of work of the BBC over the years, and I certainly remember one of my favourite moments ever was going on a BBC show the day after the Brexit result and walking through the studios and if I'd walked through with a sign saying, I love Adolf Hitler, I would have been given probably more sympathetic looks, more happy looks. They looked at me with absolute horror. I'm not quite sure I've done anything that would have warranted that other than voting for and campaigning for Brexit and things.
Julia, do you not remember the reaction on Boris Johnson's face and Michael Gove? They were stunned. Look, I don't want to defend. I don't know what the people believe, but I do think that what you believe, there's some great plot or whatever in the BBC.
I don't think there's a plot.
What they're trying to do imperfectly, because we're all human, is report as objectively as possible. They have clear guidelines. And when Geeta Guru-Murthy says something like she did, which she shouldn't have done, which is silly, they've jumped down on top of her. What more do you want?
OK, no, the BBC acted quickly and as well they should have. What she did was, I would say borderline gross misconduct in terms of that job. But I don't want her to lose her job. She's done the apology. It happens again, as you say, that she'd have to go on that basis, because that's the deal if you want to work for the BBC. I'm employed to give my opinion. She is not. She's employed not to give her opinion. But it betrays a certain attitude that she would have thought that, A, she could say it, and that it would be acceptable for her to say it.
No,
and that's the key thing, because I've had BBC cameramen, Roger, I've had BBC cameramen come up to me and say, I fully support everything you say, but don't let anyone know here because they wouldn't want me to work again.
Can I just reply to what you said? First of all, it was live, right? So she's cutting away. So no, and you have to do it. Okay, but it's a difficult skill. That's the first thing. Secondly, therefore, I don't think it's premeditated. Secondly, of course, there are people with a range of views at the BBC. And, if you were to talk about the danger of everybody being concentrated in London, which is a very different place from where I was born and brought, say, Carlisle, you're right. If you wanted to talk about the recent impartiality report on immigration and the way BBC covers immigration, there are real issues there about assumptions being made. And I do think it's true that the as it were, adverse consequences of immigration have not been sufficiently examined. All of that is true. But then you leap above that and say there's some great conspiracy. Listen, what you know above everybody else is how bloody minded and independent most journalists are. And if they're instructed by their management to do something, the instinct is to go the other way. Nobody would tell you what to do, would they? Or if they tried to.
Well, it doesn't normally go well for people, but I'm employed on the station to give my opinion. She is employed. Her contract requires her not to give her opinion. She would know that.
I agree.
You say that the BBC employs a diverse group of people. They don't. This is the problem with the BBC. The vast majority of the BBC don't have diverse views, and they also don't have the views that actually reflect the majority of the population in this country.
Well, you're making all these assumptions.
No, I'm not making these assumptions.
You have no evidence.
I know exactly what they all think. People who work at the BBC tell me.
Listen, your channel talks about talking common sense, right? Let's try common sense. Where's the evidence for that? If you say
in every programme they make, have you ever heard Radio 4?
I think there are lots of wonderful things on Radio 4. You just think
Name
wild
one.
assertions.
Name
Look,
one.
if you're going to make assertions about the whole of the organisation, you have to have more evidence than that.
All of the comedy, without exception, all of the news shows, all of the comedy shows, what they choose to cover, their obsession with things like the climate change stuff, their pushing of the trans stuff, or kids in their all of their political views are blatantly on display every day.
Hold on.
We've got about 10 seconds.
You don't believe in climate change, and even the fact that.
Oh, you see, there you go. Roger, I'm going to have to leave it there because we've literally got a second left. Roger Bolton, come back on again soon. Host of the Beeb Watch podcast, a former BBC executive.